To begin, I want to thank the organizers of Viva Vox and my dear friend, Santiago Abascal, for inviting me to be here with you today. On Friday, presenting my book, El Camino del Libertario, I said that when I started this whole adventure of publicly waging the cultural battle, I was more alone than Adam on Mother's Day, and in that context, one of the few who hugged me and put up with me when everyone turned their backs on me was dear Santiago. So I want to start here today by publicly thanking you. Thank you, Santiago. Look, Santiago, how far we have come and how much we have ahead of us. I have been preaching my invention of the capitalist system in auditoriums where the majority of those who listen do not always share what I say. Sometimes even preaching face to people who hate it because they feel alluded to by my criticism, as happened, for example, at the Davos Forum. So I must say that, just as when I spoke at the Milken Institute in Los Angeles, it is a pleasure to be among friends today. It is comforting to be in front of an audience that shares our ideas, and that is part of the enormous task of waging the cultural battle against those who want to impose on us a vision of the world that is not only immoral, but contrary to the values that made the West great. It is true that 2 years are nothing, but some things have happened since the last time I was here with you. When I came here 2 years ago, I was just a national deputy who, accompanied only by the man who now holds the position of vice president of the nation, faced the entire political system in Argentina defending the ideas of liberty. I want to tell you that although I now have a slightly more complicated and somewhat more particular job, I have never set aside, nor will I do so in the future, my historical task of being a humble disseminator of the ideas of liberty. Because I am convinced that today more than ever, these ideas and values that have taken the human species to the top are in danger and need to be defended from the siege of the damned and carcinogenic socialism. Socialism, that ideology that is painted with an altruistic patina that basically hides the worst of human beings, which is envy, hatred, resentment, unequal treatment before the law and, if necessary, murder. Because never forget that the damned socialists murdered 150 million human beings. Recently, in the conference I gave at the Milken Institute, I said that, in some sense, Argentines are prophets of an apocalyptic future that we have already lived through, but that the rest of the West still has ahead of us. Because if you look at the Argentine history of the last 2 centuries, you will see a tragedy in 2 parts, rise and fall. A tragedy that is testimony to what can happen when the ideas of freedom are replaced by any kind of collectivist experiment. In the second half of the 19th century, the Argentine leadership set in stone the basic principles of liberalism, which are the defense of life, liberty, and private property. And as a result, we saw the strongest economic growth process in our history. In fact, Argentina grew more than the equivalent Chinese rates at the time. In just 35 years, we became a world power. We were the first nation in human history to eradicate illiteracy. We had a total gross domestic product greater than the sum of Brazil, Mexico, Paraguay, and Peru together. We were the first world power in terms of GDP per capita. We, a peripheral country that was barely known to the rest of the world, were the Mecca of the West, and we received millions and millions of immigrants who dreamed of a better life in Argentina, most of them Spanish. And that is partly where the eternal brotherhood between our peoples lies. But at some point in the first half of the 19th century, the political leadership fell in love with the state, abandoned the ideas of freedom and replaced them with the doctrine of social justice, which directly attacks the freedom and property of the individual. That was the beginning of Argentina's century of humiliation, 100 years of decadence in which all the basic rules of the economy were broken, time and again. To sustain the desire of politicians to spend what we do not have, under the delirious pretext that where there is a need, a right is born, Argentina lived permanently with a fiscal deficit, with permanent growth in public spending and a situation that had to be financed. First of all, immoral politicians finance them with debt, which is nothing more or less than passing the present party on to our children, our grandchildren, and future generations. Naturally, when the financing runs out, they resort to the printing press, and so, basically, Argentina, for example, has removed 13 zeros from the currency, has had 2 hyperinflations without war. Today we could remove 3 more zeros from the currency, and they have made a real mess with the inflationary tax, robbing us all the time. And when they have no other alternative, they directly raise explicit taxes, making the country truly uncompetitive. As a result of these measures, we saw how our citizens began to systematically become poorer, until they fell to 140th place in the world in the ranking of GDP per capita, having multiplied poverty by 10 times in the last 50 years. And not only that, Argentina is a country that produces food for 400 million people and has a tax burden in the agricultural sector of 70%. Meaning that the damned state keeps the food of 280 million people and 5 million Argentines go hungry. Enough of socialism, enough of hunger, enough of misery. That is why, when I look at Europe today and also at the United States, I see, slowly, how small signs of the tragic path that Argentina sadly followed are appearing. On the other side of history, while socialism destroyed Argentina, free market capitalism literally saved the world. All that remains is to look at the global economic history of the last 250 years and, in particular, of the last 100 years to prove it. Until about 1800, the world's GDP per capita remained practically constant, but from the 19th century onwards and in the wake of the Industrial Revolution, the GDP per capita not only increased, but it did so exponentially, multiplying by more than 20 times and generating an explosion of wealth that lifted 90% of the world's population out of poverty, even though the population multiplied 8 times. Let the damn abortionists deal with that fact. What does this mean? That the more capitalism advanced, the wealth increased at an ever faster rate. That is why, while in the 19th century the global GDP per capita growth rate was on average 0.6% compounded per year, in the period between 1950 and 2000, we see that the growth rate was 2.1% compounded per year, and if we correct for the underestimation of the statistics, we would be above 3% compounded per year. In other words, free enterprise capitalism has been a panacea for the West. So it is no coincidence that those countries that are free grow twice as fast as repressed countries and have a GDP per capita 12 times greater than that of a repressed country. Therefore, not only that, but also those countries that are poor, those that are poor in the free market capitalist countries, have an average income in the lowest decile that is 15 times greater, and 90% of the population of those repressed countries lives below what a poor person would live in a capitalist country. This shows, despite the cries of the left, that free markets generate prosperity for all, not just for some. There is no case of a country in the entire history of humanity that has embraced the ideas of freedom, that has not experienced an explosion of growth and prosperity for all. On the contrary, whenever socialism has been attempted, not only in Argentina but throughout the world, it has been an economic failure, a social failure, a cultural failure, and on many occasions a failure imposed on piles and piles of corpses and names. This point is central to achieving a complete understanding of the tragedy that socialism represents. Since socialism is an ideology that goes directly against human nature, it necessarily leads to slavery or death. There is no other possible destiny. Opening the door to socialism is inviting death. But while all this is obvious, today it is more important than ever to point it out, because in recent decades the global elites have unfortunately been captivated by the siren song of socialism. Through ideas, discourses and values that have crept into the common sense of our societies, promoted by supranational organizations, by NGOs, by educational institutions, and by the entertainment industry and the media. Discourse that says that capitalism is bad because it is individualistic and that collectivism is good because it is altruistic, and, therefore, they strive for social justice. They persecute the private sector to submit to supposedly moral commandments on issues such as gender, racial issues, or environmental issues, which often end up directly attacking freedom and the ability of companies to generate wealth, but also human life. It seems that they do not understand that social justice is always unfair, because it implies theft, because it implies unequal treatment before the law, and that every attempt by politicians to act like good people ends up harming the generation of wealth and consequently harming society as a whole. They also do not realize or do not seem to care that the cost of maintaining this well-meaning pantomime of the progressives is to subvert all the values that made Western civilization the spearhead of the history of human progress. Because, deep down, they are being guided by the lowest human passions, such as envy, hatred and resentment, which cloud their thinking and blind them. What's more, they blind them so much that they live projecting their miseries on others. Therefore, to all those who think they are saving the world with the present state, with high taxes, with gender quotas and punishing businessmen, I say, do you know what is best for workers? Let them freely enter into contracts with their employers. Do they know what is best for women? Stop treating them as victims who need special care. I ask myself, do socialists consider women to be inferior beings in order to grant them privileges? I ask socialists, is it not enough to be equal before the law? Do they know what is best for the planet? Let the market find, as it has always done, the best solutions. Do they know what is best for children? A father and a mother who know them much better than any bureaucrat. And do they know how this is achieved? By removing the parasitic state from people's lives and letting citizens be free. Letting them associate freely, choose what to produce, whom to employ, where to study, whom to sell to, what to buy and what to do with the fruit of their own work. Ultimately, the world is saved not by running after the guilty agenda of a couple of bureaucrats, but by shrinking the state to enlarge society. We must destroy this parasitic idea that has been learned in the West, which says that the task of the state, that is, of the bureaucrat, is to control every aspect of the lives of citizens. This idea that politicians must take care of people from the cradle to the grave. This has never been the task of the state. The task of the state, if it exists, is to defend the life, liberty and private property of individuals. But the global elites do not realize how destructive it can be to implement the ideas of socialism, because they are too far away. They do not know what kind of society and country it can produce, and what kind of people bolted to power, and what levels of abuse it can generate. I mean, even if he has a corrupt wife, he gets dirty and takes 5 days to think about it. That is why it is up to me to show them how sinister and harmful socialism is. Because we have experienced it firsthand, we suffer it every day. Because Argentina is a country that has been infected by socialism for decades, or perhaps I should say, it was. Socialism leads to poverty and death. Anyone who says otherwise is ignorant or a liar. And since socialism leads to death, we can never, ever give in anything. We cannot let the leftists run a millimeter, not even when it seems that they are right, because they are never right. Because when we leave a crack open, they will attack us from a position that is better for them. They take advantage of the weakest among us, those who have not earned the abundance they enjoy, those who have inherited it without knowing the sacrifice it has entailed, those who know they are at fault, are consumed by guilt and want to use us all to solve their own problems. But we are not weak, we have earned what we have, we truly believe what we say, it has cost us blood and sweat to get to where we are, and no one is going to stand in our way. No matter what they do, no matter what they say, or how they attack us, that's why I tell you, I don't give a damn what the leftists think. Ultimately, there is nothing they can do to alter the course of events. In light of the things I usually say, the discussions I usually get into, I often receive criticism from different actors in the establishment and in particular, from the envelopes of journalism. I say, with this thing of having taken away the official guidelines from the media, it seems that I am looking for a job in the underground, and I am going to crack down on the little redhead. But don't worry, he is also a leftist, so I am not interested in that business. They tell me, but you are now a head of state, how can you make these comments, how can you open up to talking like that about your political adversaries? How can you talk like that about other leaders like you did 2 years ago, or about a president, as I am now? In any case, now that I am president, my responsibility to fight the cultural battle is even greater, because what I do and say has a greater effect. And fighting the cultural battle is not only morally correct, but it is also necessary from a government point of view. It is necessary for the success of any liberal or libertarian government program, so that the policies they implement are long-lasting and so that in the future it is the citizens themselves who defend their freedom and do not let themselves be trampled on again by the socialists. Because, in addition, it is important to raise one's voice, because our adversaries always have the advantage. Because they have their people involved in all levels of the state. They have the strength of the unions and social organizations. They have the prebendary businessmen who live off the state and finance them. They have the supranational organizations, the non-governmental organizations, the media and the entertainment industry, and in my case, in my country, even control over football. In that sense, we must recognize that they have done a formidable job in terms of what Antonio Gramsci would call the construction of a true global hegemony. If all of us who believe in life, liberty and property do nothing, we are condemned. If all of us who believe in the values that made the West the most prosperous civilization in history do nothing, we are condemned. Therefore, all of us who are here, Spanish and Argentine citizens, presidents, thinkers, businessmen, all of us who believe in freedom, must stand up and say to them, enough. Enough of the hatred, resentment and envy that socialism implies. Enough of the self-flagellation and guilt of the West. Enough of the pretension of living in a crystal world, without anyone being able to feel offended. Enough of the state's interference in each and every aspect of our lives. Let's go back to defending the values that made the West great. Let's go back to defending life, liberty and property. We are now 5 months into my tenure as President of the Argentine Republic on December 10th, and I can proudly say that we are fulfilling the promise we made to the Argentines. We took on an economy on the brink of hyperinflation, with a 15-point consolidated fiscal deficit, with uncontrolled issuance after having issued money for 13 points of GDP 1 year. With prices repressed at ridiculous levels and with very high interest rates and, despite all that, we are turning it around. With an enormous effort on the part of all Argentines. But slowly we are turning it around. We have systematically resurrected inflation, month after month, until we have achieved a monthly single-digit inflation. We have lowered the interest rate without causing inflation to skyrocket and without causing the exchange rate to skyrocket. We are making the largest and most abrupt adjustment in human history and, to the horror of all leftists, society continues to support us with the same conditions as on December 10th. That is why the local and international left is crying. Because everything that they summarize as impossible, we are doing. Because everything that they have broken with their economic shamanism, we are correcting with work and with the correct ideas and values. Because all the ideas, values and theories that they preach in my country have already failed. And everything that they are afraid of is beginning to succeed. And also because we are showing the world that, even in the worst adversity, even when we are burdened with the worst economic legacy in the history of the country, even when we are the government with the least institutional power in history, and even with all the politics, the media and the prebendary businessmen against us, those of us who wield the truth in one fist and conviction in the other can persevere and emerge triumphant. Because, sooner or later, the truth always prevails over lies, freedom always prevails over oppression, life always prevails over death, and good always triumphs over evil. For all this, I want to tell you that I am an optimist. More and more people around the world are rebelling against the damned socialist mandate, and they do so because, unlike the socialists, we trust in the citizens. We think that we must treat them like children in a kindergarten. We trust in your creativity, in your ability to solve problems on your own, in your judgment to raise your children in freedom within the family. We trust in the ability of men and women to forge their own destiny, and that this will result in greater benefit for society as a whole. And this trust that we have in the common citizen sooner or later returns, because to gain trust you have to give trust, and we have established a pact of truth with society, because, as I always say, it is preferable to tell an uncomfortable truth instead of a comfortable lie. For all this, I want to commit myself to all of you and tell you that I will not fail you. I will lead by example and show the world that a government with our ideas can be successful, and the feats that our government accomplishes in Argentina will be testimony and preaching of the capitalist paradigm of free enterprise. But they will not be any miracle, but the necessary consequence of the exercise of correct ideas, because freedom is the only possible path to prosperity. That is why I say to you, courage in this quest to save the West from decadence, because the West still has time to choose whether it wants to persist on the path of failure or if it wants to return to the path of freedom. Finally, I want to leave you with a quote from one of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century, who was Ludwig von Mises, and who also demonstrated the impossibility of socialism as early as 1922. With his famous treatise, Socialism. Mises argued that socialism is an alternative to capitalism as potassium cyanide is an alternative to water. And since Mises was a person with great vision and understood what the challenge was about, he made a quote from Virgil, his favorite phrase, a phrase in Latin that says, tu ne sed malis, sed contra audentior ito, which means do not give in to evil, but face it with greater audacity. Let us not give in to socialism, let us face it with greater courage. Naturally, it seems like a titanic task, it seems like we are few, but we have nothing to fear because victory on the battlefield does not depend on the number of soldiers, but on the forces that come from heaven. Long live freedom, damn it! Long live freedom, damn it! Long live freedom, damn it! Thank you very much. Thank you, Santiago. Thank you, Vox. Thank you all. Thank you very much.